True Set Free, question and answer. Today is the day. If you're new, welcome. My name is Matt Lewis. This is Pastor Steve Whinery. We're coming to you live from Calvary Chapel, Tri-Cities in Kennewick, Washington. If you have questions regarding the Bible or the Christian faith, you guys can email behind me, crosswalkradio@gmail.com. You can text or voicemail 707-872-7677. Whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, if you guys could subscribe, share, do all the things that help us get the program out on social media, we would really appreciate that. I want to tell you, and Mike's going to put a link in the description as well about our podcast. We started a long-form podcast. We're about 10 episodes recorded so far. If you have any topics you would want Steve to go through and discuss, it's a long-form platform that allows us to go through theology and different things in more of a detailed level than we have time for busting through questions on Q&A. So look for that. I think we're on episode 3 that's been released. That is every other week, so every 2 weeks on Friday at 4 o'clock, you'll see a video come out for the podcast. So if you want to follow us, there's a bazillion things going on here. I would tell you to download our app. If you go on there and click on events, there's a ton of stuff going on this summer. We have a Cars and Coffee event. We have kids camp. We have worship night, Sunday night, high school outreach, missions trip, father-son retreat, FCA sports, women's retreat, on and on and on. So that's the best way to follow us. If you would like to join us for church sometime, if you're looking for a fellowship, we'd love to have you. We have an 8:30 in a service in our indoor sanctuary, and then we currently have a 10:30 outdoor service in our outdoor amphitheater. Now, we do stream that in our fellowship hall. If you show up second service and you want to sit inside, we have that available for you as well. And then in 3 weeks, we swap that inside and outside just for the heat. And so what I'm telling you is that first service will be outside, second service will be inside starting in 3 weeks on July 20th. So that's all, enough information. Do you have anything you want to tell them? Any big reveals you want to?
I have nothing.
Nothing, perfect. Yeah. Let's jump in then and get some questions here. It's my first one for today. It's coming from Trey. He says in Hebrews 2:1. Oh, by the way, that email I sent you, I think we answered that one already a couple weeks ago. That's why I'm starting with this one.
Okay.
Hebrews 2:1 says this: is this verse a warning about passive negligence of Christian disciplines, or can even legitimate things distract believers from faithfulness? And I'll let you read the passage just for context on what in the world Trey's asking here. Hebrews 2:1.
Find Hebrews. There we go. It says, therefore we must give the more earnest heed to the things which we have heard, lest we drift away. Let me do some more, just so we can get some context here. Verse 2 says, for if the word spoken through angels proved steadfast, and every transgression and disobedience received a just reward, how shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation, which at first began to be spoken by the Lord and was confirmed to us by those who heard him? God also bearing witness both with signs and wonders, with various miracles and gifts of the Holy Spirit according to his own will. So my answer to you is yes. It's a warning about indolence in the sense of you stop caring about the basics. And this is something that you see in anything that you do. Everything to me is a sports analogy. So anything that you do in sports, anything, you have to pay attention to the basics. And so, whether you're talking about golf, your swing, you have to pay attention to it. And you have to practice and that kind of stuff. Not speaking as a golfer, because I'm not a great golfer. But it's the same thing in football. It's the same thing in wrestling. It was the same thing in track. It was the same thing in
motocross.
Motocross. Yeah, it's the same thing. You have to pay attention to the basics if you're going to succeed. Christianity has been described as being like climbing a greased pole. You never reach a plateau. And so you're always advancing, or you're going to be slipping back. And not to make that a works trip, but it's like it's advancing in your relationship with the Lord. And so if you think about this like in a marriage context, there was a certain amount of information I had about Bobby before I got married, and I obviously was not satisfied with that. I wanted an ongoing relationship with her. I got married to her, and I didn't stop talking to her, and I didn't stop, actually paying attention to the interaction between her and I. In the times that I have done this, it's not good.
Yeah.
Things go bad, and it's like the whole idea of I told you I loved you when we got married, and if it changes, I'll send you a text. It's like
I tried that before. It doesn't work.
Yeah, you tried that. You actually did.
Well, I mean, like not on purpose.
Oh. And so that doesn't work, and we don't think of, you might think of marriage as work, but I don't think of it as work. It's just an ongoing relationship. And so if I see it suffering in some area, usually that's on me. I'm not paying attention. And so I just want to give that proviso when we're talking about this, because this is not a works trip. And what Paul is talking about when he's saying this is that there is a danger of neglect in your relationship with God. It's like anything else. We get used to things, and we kind of despise them, and until something bad happens, and then all of a sudden we're all about it. Well, better not to neglect, and that's the point that the writer of Hebrews is making here. He compares our relationship with God, the one that we have New Testament, with the Old Testament relationship with God that was given by angels. And in that Old Testament relationship, he says, if the word spoken through angels proved steadfast, and every transgression and disobedience received a just reward, how shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation? And so the point that he's making is what we've got is way, way far and above better than what they had in the Old Testament with the law, and God obviously took the law seriously and expected his people to. And so the salvation that we have in Jesus is something that is precious because of what it cost. And what it cost God the Father was his only begotten Son. And neglecting that to a father who's lost his son would not be good. Would not be good. It would be offensive. And so again, the whole book of Hebrews, this is the first warning in the book of Hebrews. And so there's 5 major warnings in the book of Hebrews, and it's all about you need to continue in your relationship with God. You need to not turn away from Christ. You need to not become hard-hearted. All of these things. It's a book about not walking away from Jesus. And so this is the first point that's made. There's a danger of neglect, and if you neglect the things of God, then you're going to be hardened to the things of God, and you can walk away from the things of God, and that's not good for you. So
yeah, that's what I was thinking as he's building. Wait till you get to chapter 6 and some of the stuff he says. And
that's chapter 10.
Yeah, one of the reasons that I'm in the not the once saved always saved camp is because this whole book of Hebrews, you basically have to chuck if that's going to be your theological position.
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we're involved in our walks with God, and we need to be paying attention to it. So.
All right, thanks, Trey. Appreciate the question, man. This next one's from Jose, Pastor Steve. Very simply, he asked, does God forgive people that commit suicide?
There is no sin that is unforgivable. Okay, and so the problem with suicide is that it's the last act, right, that a person can do. And so in that sense, I take a gun and I on purpose put it to my head and pull the trigger. There's no time for repentance there, right? And so what's happened is I have died, and that sin is still on me, and it's the sin of self-murder. And so people will say that suicide is the unforgivable sin. Here's the problem with that. I can be walking down, I have a relationship with Jesus. I know the Lord. I've been walking with him since, 1975. And so I'm walking down the road, and, there's a crazy guy in a truck, and he comes up onto the sidewalk, and he runs into me. And so now I'm dead. But right before I died, I was thinking about something that Matt said to me a day and a half before, and I'm really ticked off at him. And the reason I'm ticked off is because my pride was hurt in that situation. Well, that's the sin of pride. And then the truck smacks me, and I die. And so now where am I going? And the reason I'm giving you this illustration is because where this always goes with the whole issue of suicide is if you commit suicide, is it automatically you're going to jail, you don't pass go, you don't collect $200, going to hell, right? And so in the situation that I just gave you, I committed the sin of pride and the sin of anger without a cause, which Jesus compared to murder in Matthew chapter 5. And then I get creamed by a truck, and I don't have time to repent of that. So am I going to hell at that point? And the answer to that is no, if I have a real relationship with Christ. And so the fact that I'm a Christian does not mean that I don't sin. The fact that I'm a Christian means that I've got the Holy Spirit in my life, and he's prompting me to make sure that my walk with God is right. And there are going to be times when I fail, and I fail because of my flesh, or I fail because of depression, or I fail because of hopelessness, that kind of thing. I don't stop being a Christian just because I fail. That is not. Don't want to do it. I'm doing a double negative here. That is not being a Christian. Not being a Christian is when I look at Jesus and go, I don't want to have anything to do with you, and I mean it, and I walk away. That's not being a Christian. Okay?
Blasphemy of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Only one sin.
Right, and that's a sin that can't be forgiven. So, practically speaking, I'm a pastor, so I've done. I can't even tell you how many funerals I've done, and I've done a number of them for suicides. And one of the things that you need to understand about the situation with suicide is that people get themselves into hopeless situations, and Satan is involved in this whole thing, and he has been a murderer from the beginning. And so he's trying to get people to kill themselves, off themselves, and that kind of thing. And so you have a spiritual dynamic to it. And then here's the modern issue. Every suicide funeral for a suicide that I have done, every single one, has been for someone who was on prescription meds, talking about antipsychotics or antidepressants, usually antidepressants. Every single one of them has been a situation where they were on antidepressants and stopped them suddenly. Every one of them. And what's happening there is an antidepressant is basically changing your brain chemistry. So you feel, you get numb to things and you feel better in some instances, but it's changing your brain chemistry. And when you stop them, it causes real problems when you stop them suddenly. If you're going to stop antidepressants, you do it with a doctor's, under a doctor's care, and you do it slowly over time. In any case, God knows all that, and he knows exactly what's going on with those situations. And that is not, it's still suicide, obviously, because the person did it, but there's a chemical constituent to that whole situation. And so God knows these things. And so the question I have in a situation like that is not, did he sin one last time and died without asking for forgiveness, whether you're talking about suicide or whether you're talking about anger or whether you're talking about lust or whether you're talking about pride. I'm not asking that question. The question I'm asking is, did this person really have a relationship with Jesus Christ? And if they did, you can know for sure that God was working on them and basically trying to get their head straight. And I could tell you story after story of this kind of situation with people who almost committed suicide. God doesn't stop with people. And so it's not like he's not able to take care of somebody who's having a problem mentally because of antidepressants. It's just that sometimes people fail. They fail. And they end up dying because of it. There's a passage that people use in the context of suicide, and it's in 1 Corinthians chapter 3. And in the passage, it says this, do you not know that you are the temple of God, that the Spirit of God dwells in you? If anyone defiles the temple of God, God will destroy him, for the temple of God is holy, which temple you are. And so people will say, okay, a man or a woman is the temple of God, and they defiled it with the sin of murder, literally defiled the temple of God, and so God's going to destroy them, and that means they're going to hell. Well, that's not the context of the passage. I've literally heard people use this to tell people you can't eat sugar because you're the temple of God, and if you defile the temple of God with sugar, then God will destroy you. And so obviously that's a nonsense thing. We could talk about sugar on another issue. There is a place later on in Corinthians where it talks about us individually being the temple of God. This is not the place. In this place, what's being spoken about is a church that's being ripped up by a bunch of people who are arguing with each other over who, what teacher is the best and what group is the best in the church. And Paul is telling them, you guys are not spiritual, you're carnal, because basically you're behaving like mere men because of your envy, strife, and divisions. And he ends that passage up with, you, do you not know that you, and it's in the plural, and it's talking about all of the people, are the temple of God. It's talking about the church there. And so the promise there is that if you bust up a church, the fellowship of believers, if you do that, God will destroy you. That's what's being spoken about in this passage. And so later on in chapter 6, I believe it is, it talks about us individually being the temple of God, but this is not the passage that speaks to that. So this is specifically a warning about not wrecking a church. So again, it doesn't apply to suicide. It doesn't apply to suicide. And, one of the things that you need to remember, this is out of James chapter 2, is that when God's looking at sin, he sees sin as all the same thing. It's just a failure to keep the law. It's a breaking of the law. And so if the sin is covetousness, it's the same as the sin of adultery, it's the same as the sin of dishonoring my father and mother. It's the same as the sin of murder. It's the same as the sin of stealing. I have broken the law, is what it says in that passage. And so when you're talking about the final act of somebody and whether or not they were in sin when they died, you're not talking about an issue that deals with salvation, unless the sin is, I don't want to have anything to do with you, Jesus, and they walk away and they mean it, right? And that's denying the Lord. And if you deny the Lord, the Bible says that he'll deny you also. And so people who are in a situation where they're thinking about suicide are having all kinds of real issues that are real problems. And God sees all of that, and he's compassionate towards us. So Psalm 103, it says that he knows that we're but flesh, and he understands the situations that we're going through. And so, yeah. Now, having said all that, when somebody tells me that they're suicidal, I take it seriously. And it's something that is not to be done. Christians are not to do this. You don't have the right to take you don't have the right to take anybody else's life. unless you're talking about a self-defense situation, and that's not a right in the sense of I have the right to take your life because I'm defending myself. But you don't have to have the right to take your own life. That's something that is in the purview of God, and you need to understand that. And if you're asking that question because you want to check out, that is not what God has for you. And if that's what your thinking is, you need to get in and see a pastor. You need to talk with somebody, and get some things straight. Satan would love to destroy your life in all kinds of ways, and that's a really good way to do it. Suicide is one of the most selfish things that you could ever do, because there are people around you who love you, and they get to deal with your final act for the rest of their lives. I have a very good friend. She was a girl that actually lived with Bobby and I when she was in high school, and her mom committed suicide, and she found her in the bathroom, and the girl has never gotten over it. Just an awful situation. And so usually when somebody is in that mindset, they're thinking about nothing but them. And that's exactly where Satan wants to get you, thinking about nothing but yourself. And it's one of the ways that he can depress you in major ways. And so if you're thinking in those terms, you need to get in and see somebody.
All right. Another question, completely different topic, goes like this. How do males stop from lusting after women? And can you define lusting after women?
Okay. Let me go to a passage here. I'm going to go to Matthew chapter 5, and this is where Jesus talks about the sin of lust. He says, "You've heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you, whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart." The word for lust in that passage is, let's see, I'm looking at the Greek here. Well, it's epithumio is where the word comes from. That's a verb form of epithumia, and the word itself means to strongly desire to have what belongs to someone else, and or to engage in an activity which is morally wrong. And then it goes on and gives examples: to covet, to lust, evil desires, lust, desire. And so the word in the passage where it says whoever looks at a woman, it's the idea of just looking at her, and then you want to have her physically. You're lusting over her body, that kind of thing. That's what's being spoken about. And practically speaking, there's a couple of things in the passage that you can look at to take care of this whole thing. One of the things that Jesus is obviously pointing out is that adultery is a heart issue. It always starts in the mind long before there's an action that's involved in this. Same thing with fornication. Fornication is sex outside of marriage. Adultery is sex with somebody who's married or you're married, and it's outside of marriage. Jesus in this passage says, if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you, for it's more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you, for it's more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. And so the first point that Jesus is making in the passage is you need to take this seriously, because hell is involved. And not that you go to hell as soon as you lust after somebody, but the kind of lifestyle that you are living will take you away from Christ, and it will get you into the place where you have your part with the unbelievers, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I'm quoting Jesus there. And so you need to take it seriously. And what Jesus says here is you pluck out your eye or you cut off your hand, because it's better to go into heaven maimed than go into hell with your whole body. And that's the idea of you make sure that you are controlling yourself. One of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. And so when I am walking with the Lord and I'm filled with the Spirit of God, I have self-control so I can choose what I do with my eyes. And obviously that's the situation here. I can choose what I do with my eyes. So I'm 65, and unfortunately this issue never goes away. I thought when I got married it would go away, and it did not. It's irritating. And so this is an issue that never goes away. So driving down the road, and I'm in my truck, and I see a cute girl on the side of the road. There's a passage in the book of Job where Job says, I've made a covenant with my eyes not to look on a woman to lust after her. And that's what I've done too, made a covenant with my eyes. And so I see a cute girl. As soon as that happens, I recognize that she's cute. I recognize that she's attractive. That's why I'm looking, and I decide I'm not going to look anymore. And what I do is I get my eyes straight ahead, and I don't look in the rearview mirror as I'm going by. Just keep my eyes straight ahead and then focus on that. And so that's what Jesus is talking about in these passages here. You control yourself. So control your eyes, control your hands, and obviously hands are involved if you got into a physical situation with a woman.
Can I ask you two things on that?
Yeah.
Sure. So that comes up, okay, you're driving down the road, cute girl, whatever's running. You see the girl, the first look, you can't even control.
Right, yeah.
It's just something that's part of your environment. And we live in 2025.
Right.
And so it's not California, Hollywood crazy, but there's times, like I don't go to the mall.
Yeah.
I haven't been in, I can't even remember the last time I was there. But when you go to certain places, it's like you have provocatively dressed women trying to get you to look. And so that first look, if you're in society or you live in the world or you're alive, you can't control.
Right.
So
it's the second look.
It's the second look.
Yeah, that's the one that always gets you.
Right.
And so that's what I focus on. So saw the cute girl, and then I get my eyes straight ahead because it just gets bad from there, and I'm going to have to be repenting. And
James chapter 1, take your thought captive.
Yeah.
Don't let it move on and give birth to sin.
Yeah, all of that kind of stuff.
Okay. Second part to that. Guys will ask, and specifically to this question is, how do you stop lusting? Can you define that? Specifically, guys will ask, okay, well, how do you get married and navigate this? Because you look at your wife, and have you ever noticed, like, all the patriarchs' wives are like smoking babes? They all list as beautiful women. Abraham's afraid that he's going to get killed off because his wife looks so good. Yeah. And so a guy who's going to marry his wife has to look at her and go, she's attractive.
Right.
I would like to marry her.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that and not lust?
Right. That was my next point that I was going to make here. If you're lusting after women, one of the things that you need to do immediately is start praying for your wife, whether you have one or whether you don't. You start praying for her, because the whole issue of attraction to the opposite sex is put into a person specifically because of the whole issue of marriage. And I've talked with people who try to, circumvent that and say, well, I'm marrying my husband, but frankly, I'm not even attracted to him. And I am always, we have a talk at that point, because God does not want you to be, to have a relationship where you are not attracted to your wife.
What a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna be in bed 3 years later, rolling over, looking at the person, going, "I made a mistake," and that's not fair to the person you're going to marry, and it's not what God has designed for you. And so, practically speaking, God made specifically the female body to be attractive to men, and He made the male body to be attractive to women. Somewhat less, there's differences there, but that's how He made us, right? And so the fact that I am attracted to my fiance does not mean that I'm going to go into a mindset where I'm having sex with her every night or thinking about those kinds of things. Because what I want to do is I want to keep my relationship with her pure. And so if my head goes there, then I go take a cold shower. I'm telling you what I did when I was single. I go take a cold shower because there's some bodily stuff that are at issue here. I get my mind off of what I've been thinking about at that point. I pick up my Bible. I spend some time in prayer and reading and just get my head straight. I go and hang out with one of my buddies because I'm not gonna be sitting there lusting in my head when I'm out playing ball with one of my friends. And I'm certainly not going to be doing other things that can get you in trouble too, that men do privately. And so I'll go out, and there's all these practical ways to keep myself from getting into a problem. But specifically, what Satan wants to do with the sexual relationship that God has blessed, it's blessed inside of marriage. And so obviously there's an attraction there. And when you get into the marriage relationship, what's going to happen is you're going to be able to act on that attraction. And God looks at that and he says that the marriage bed is undefiled. And so God blesses the marriage. He looks at the man and the woman in Genesis chapter 2, and he blessed them. He blesses marriage. And so that's the only place that a relationship with a woman or with a man is something that's blessed of God. And so Satan wants to tweak that. And so you just don't let him tweak it. And so when I'm talking about you start praying for your wife, that's exactly the kind of things that I would do in situations like that. I just start praying about my marriage, praying about how God wanted it to be, praying that God would bless my wife, and even when I was engaged, I did the same thing. I knew at that point that I was praying for Bobby, my wife, but every time that Satan tempted me to lust, and this is when Satan's tempting you. Every time Satan tempted me to lust, what I would do is pray for my marriage, and Satan doesn't want me praying for my marriage. And so consequently, he stops attacking me that way. And so a lot of spiritual warfare is going after things that way. What Satan wants to do is tweak something that God has designed for your life, and what you need to do is get it back in the place that God's designed it. So you pray for your marriage at that point. And it's one of the best ways to do it. Try it. You'll see what happens. If it's a situation where you're already married and you're lusting after other women, obviously praying for your marriage and praying for your wife is going to be something that is going to help to fix that whole situation. But basically you get your head in the place that God has designed it to be when there is a right sexual relationship, and then the problem basically goes away. So
I was thinking about this in our first question when you're talking about climbing a grease pole, or if you're stagnant, you're actually going backwards. I just picture spiritual warfare. You're either taking ground, and if you're stagnant, it's like you're going to get attacked, you're going to get messed with, and so there's a process here, and you go back to praying, which is part of the process of talking to the Lord, whatever. It's like you have to be effectual in these things in order for them not to overtake you.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to push back is prayer. And then when you're getting attacked, every time you pray for that person, Satan's not going to like that.
Right.
It's just a great...
One of the best ways not to get hurt in a ball game is to hit the guy before he hits you.
Mm-hmm. And
it's like that's how you do it.
And the one hitting it hurts far less than the one getting hit.
Exactly. If you're just standing there and some guy comes along and hits you, it's not going to feel good. But on the other hand, if you have the momentum and you're hitting the other guy, it's one of the ways to keep from getting hurt. And it's the same way spiritually speaking. Say you stand still and. Standing still, and I'm obviously thinking about football. Standing still in a football game is not a good idea. You're always on the move. You're always watching out. You got your head on a swivel, and you're looking for some way to get into the game. And if you are standing there, that I used to call it head hunting. So on punt returns, you're not allowed to do it anymore. But on punt returns and on kickoff returns, that kind of stuff. If I was on the other side of the field, you always had some guy that was just jogging along, and not in the game, and you get to block them. And so I would run up behind them, plant my foot, turn around, and just pop them under the chin, and it was headhunting. And they'd go down, the crowd would go, ooh, and that kind of stuff. I was like the devil. And that's what the devil will do to you. You need to be in the game.
All right. Last thing on this is pretty much everything that you just said is so antithetical to secular thought. And we live in a culture now. I even see this in young men in the church where they'll listen to you say that and they'll just kind of be in shock. And the mindset is, well, how am I going to know if I'm compatible if we just totally ignore this until it's time for marriage? What happens if we get married and it doesn't work in the area of the physical relationship? And I hear it constantly. So what do you say to somebody who's like, that just seems crazy?
You are naive. You have no idea what a marriage is. That's the deal. You know what? The plumbing works, and it's like you get into a marriage relationship, the attraction is supposed to be there, and so that's the way that's supposed to work. But you get into a marriage relationship, you're going to find out what the physical relationship is all about. You are going to find out that everything that you thought it was is not what it is. That's what you're going to find out, even if you've been sexually active before the fact. It's not the same, and so you have a bunch to learn in the first place. Here's the other thing: when you're talking about this whole issue of saving yourself for marriage and that kind of thing, I got married at 22. I was thinking about marriage from the time that I was probably 17 years old to the time that I was 22, and I finally got married. That's 5 years, right? I cannot tell you how much time I wasted on this. It was ridiculous. And thinking about it and worrying about it and all that kind of stuff. And if I could go back and talk to my 19-year-old self, I'd go, self, you don't have anything to worry about. As far as a physical relationship and that kind of thing. You wait, for the next few years until you get married. And that all works itself out. And basically, this is something that I'll tell people that are struggling with this. After you get married, you can have the physical relationship anytime you want, all day long if you want, 7 days a week if you want, if your wife and if your wife will go for that.
Yeah, if she's a godly woman.
and it's like. You are going to be experiencing this unless the Lord comes back soon, literally thousands of times. And so you have plenty of time to practice. You have plenty of time to get it straight. You have plenty of time for two people who don't know what they're doing to figure out what they're doing. And actually, when you're in a situation like that, it's a cool thing because you're learning together, and it's the love relationship that God designed for us. And so that kind of thinking is absolutely naive, that you have to try it out before you get there. Because, here's another thing. When you're talking about the person that you are dating, and actually, I'm going to do a study on Christian dating this next Sunday. When you're talking about the Christian you are dating, even when you're talking about the Christian or the person that you are engaged to, you don't know if you're going to be married to them. And so people will go, well, we're going to get married anyway, and so it's not a big deal and that kind of thing. And one of the things I came from a worldly background, and so I made all kinds of blunders in this kind of area. And you have to have a talk with your wife about this. And it's not pleasant. It's not a good conversation. And what the Bible teaches is that when you are involved in that kind of relationship, you are ripping off, you are stealing from your spouse. You're stealing from your husband, you're stealing from your wife, and you go, well, I'm not married. Well, you're going to be, and that person will be ripped off. And it's not the kind of thing that you want. Better to do it the way that God says. You don't have all the baggage that comes along with it. And you guys, when you're talking about pornography, guys are visually oriented, and it takes years for that stuff to go away. And you don't want to be in bed with your wife and some other lady that you saw in a magazine, or some other lady that you saw on the internet. That is not what you want. It will wreck what God's got for you. And so, this kind of stuff, people who have that kind of attitude, they have no idea what they're talking about. No idea. And so if you've had that attitude, sorry, but you're completely naive. And God's, again, got something better for you. He's not trying to wreck people's fun. He designed the marriage relationship. He designed the physical relationship, and he designed it to be fun and to be pleasurable and to be something that draws two people together. And we can do all kinds of things that will just wreck that. And so you don't want to wreck it. So do it the way God says.
All right, there you go. Genesis 35. That's where we're going next.
Good.
Yeah. Miss Gray's on here. Miss Gray, I don't think you understand what he was saying. So I know you're commenting on there that was awkward to single ladies, but Pastor Steve's talking about the context of a guy trying to figure that out. And so it's absolutely needed and pointed to speak about those things. So I understand it can be an awkward conversation, but if I'm a guy, I need to hear that truth. And so it may be uncomfortable, but it's totally 100% appropriate. Genesis 35 in verses 9 through 15, Jacob has... the question is about Jacob. I actually don't have a name to this. It says, Jacob is again told by God his name is Jacob. Is this because Jacob was struggling to leave the old man behind? And then the second part to this is also in verse 14, why did Jacob offer that specific offering?
Okay. So this is a passage. If you look at verse 7, it says he built an altar there and called the place El Bethel because there God appeared to him when he fled from the face of his brother. And so what God is doing in this situation is he's bringing Jacob back to the place where he started. He fled from his brother. This is in Genesis chapter 28. And when he got to Bethel, he laid his head on a rock because that's all he had for a pillow. And God gave him a vision. He gave him a dream about a stairway to heaven, or a ladder to heaven. And that ended up later on being used by Jesus as an illustration of himself. In any case, God gave him a vision there, and Jacob made a promise that if God would be with him, that he would give him a tithe of everything that he had, that he would serve him and give him a tithe. And what's happened is Jacob has come back to the land of Canaan. He was gone for better than 20 years. And he's come back to the land of Canaan. He was in Shechem for a period of time. And God told him to go down to Bethel after there was some issues in chapter 34 in Shechem. Before he got into the land of Canaan, God had made this promise, and you referenced it, that his name was made a covenant with him and changed his name to Jacob. And this is just God reminding Jacob that he's faithful. And so Bethel is an important place for Jacob. It's where he first met the Lord, and this is the place where God brings him back after that 20-year hiatus with Laban, his father-in-law. God brings Jacob back, and he reiterates his relationship with the Lord. You also see him making everybody cleanse the house, getting rid of all their little idols and that kind of stuff. And obviously there's some purification going on there. And so this is just God saying, I'm the guy. I'm the Lord Almighty. I'm El Shaddai, is what it says in Hebrew there. and I am the one who changed your name, and your name is still changed. Okay, and so he's doing that. As far as the drink offering, he pours oil on the pillar, and basically he takes a large stone, sets it up, and it's a marker for him. It's a place of remembrance. This is where God met with him, and so and literally in this passage, God meets with him personally. This is an appearance of God to Jacob, and so this is Jesus and Jacob having a one-on-one here, because the New Testament tells us that the appearances of God in the Old Testament were Jesus. And so Jacob sets up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, a pillar of stone, and he poured a drink offering on it, and he poured oil on it. Oil was something that Jacob poured on it on the pillar in Bethel in chapter 28. The drink offering is something that's new. Oil represents the power of the Holy Spirit, and it represents abundance and things like that in the Old Testament. And so it was an offering that you gave to God for those reasons. The drink offering was wine, and actually there's a passage, I think it's at Psalm 104, maybe 115, I can't remember. I think it's 104, might be 104:15. In that passage it says, in the King James Version, he's given us the wine to make our hearts rejoice and the oil to make our face to shine. And it's talking about the work of the Holy Spirit in a believer's life. And so wine, a drink offering, was something that you gave when you were telling the Lord that you were going to serve him gladly with a joyful heart because of what he's done for you. And that's what Jacob was doing in reiterating his relationship with God at the place where God had appeared to him over 20 years before.
It was Psalm 104:15. You got it.
Yep.
Good on that?
Yep.
All right. I'll fix that on the screen here after I read this, guys. This is what it says. Next one. Why does it say things like Rabboni, which means teacher, or other original language words like tetelestai, when it's all in Greek anyway?
What's happening there is you have a situation where Jesus is not speaking in Greek. Jesus is speaking. A lot of commentators think that Jesus spoke in Aramaic, which is like it's Syriac. It's a close relation to Hebrew. It's like how would you do this? Spanish versus Portuguese. They're both Latin languages, and so Aramaic is close to Hebrew. There's a good chance that Jesus spoke Hebrew. In any case, the term that's being used there is a term that is not a Greek word. There is no Greek word Rabboni, and that's the word in Greek in this passage. That's how it's pronounced, Rabboni. And that is not a Greek word. That's what's called a transliteration. And so, for example, the word baptize in the Bible is a straight transliteration from the Greek word for immerse. So if you were translating baptize, you would translate it to immerse. And because of some doctrinal issues, when it was being translated into English, they didn't want to translate it immerse, because if you do, then what happens when you sprinkle or you pour when you're baptizing? And the cultures that were translating the Bible at that time did that. So what they did was a transliteration, bring it straight into English. So there is no English word baptize. We have it now, but it originally comes from Greek, and it's a straight from Greek to English transliteration, and then it became part of our language. And it's the same thing with Rabboni. And so the reason that he is giving the definition of it is because the Greeks don't know what Rabboni means, even though it's written down in Greek. And again, transliteration, written down in Greek. Tetelestai isn't transliterated. Tetelestai is the Greek word for it is finished. And so the reason you know that is because your pastor, and I don't know if it's me or not, your pastor has told you that it is finished means tetelestai in Greek, and this is how the Greek term was used. And so that's a different thing altogether. So when you're talking about the Greek term tetelestai, that was used in the signing of contracts, letting you know that something was paid in full, that kind of thing. And again, you're getting the meaning of the term, it is finished at that point. And so again, that's why they do that. So
Okay. Got about 10 minutes left. We're going to John 13, verse 27.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, was Judas demon-possessed in that passage, John 13, 27?
Yeah, verse 27. Now after the piece of bread, let me read earlier. When Jesus had said these things, verse 21, he was troubled in spirit and testified and said, most assuredly, I say to you, one of you will betray me. And then leaning back on Jesus' breast, in verse 25, John here says to him, Lord, who is it? And Jesus answered, it is he to whom I shall give a piece of bread when I've dipped it. And having dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. Now after the piece of bread, Satan entered him. Then Jesus said to him, what you do, do quickly. But no one at the table knew for what reason he said this to him. And it goes on. And so, yes, Satan entered him. So, yep, demon-possessed at that point. So Satan has been tempting the guy up until this point. He's been attacking the guy up until this point. Judas has no real defense here because he's not relying on the Lord. That's why you see Jesus reaching out to him. Even this is called the sop. This dipped bread was an act of honor during the Passover. And so the host, what you would do is you would take and basically make kind of a sandwich out of some of the dips that are on the table, and you would pass it to one of the other people, and it was an honor to the person that you passed it to. And so Jesus, out of all the 12 disciples, takes that honor and he gives it to Judas, which also means he has to be within arm's reach of Judas. And we know where John was sitting. John was sitting on Jesus's right hand. So Judas would have been sitting on Jesus's left hand at that point. And that, again, was a place of honor, because they would lean on their left elbow, and they would eat with their right hands around a table. And the fact that John can put his head up against Jesus's chest lets you know that John is on his right hand. So Judas is on the left hand. It's a place of honor. And so Jesus picked that for him. And what he's trying to do is reach Judas because he knows the kind of attack that he's under, and Judas just folds to the attack, and now Satan enters him. And yes, that's demon possession. He's being inspired by Satan from this point on in the passage. So not a good place to be.
Not a good place at all.
You don't want to be that guy.
All right, probably last one for today. Can you explain what this guy's talking about when he says Adam and Eve were the first members of the church, and then he referred to them as underage?
Well, first off, there is no church in the Old Testament. Paul in Ephesians in chapter 3 lets us know that the church is a mystery that wasn't revealed in the Old Testament. It was something that's revealed in the New Testament. And so there was no church in the Old Testament. And so he's wrong on that issue. I don't know who this guy is, but he's wrong about that. So they're not the first members of the church. I don't know what he's talking about when he says that they're underage, except for, obviously you have a situation where God brings them into existence, and on the first day they're a man and a woman.
It's from the camp that they're in. So this underage status refers to their position before the full revelation of the church in the New Testament, not their actual age. And so he's trying to say that, God's plan of salvation for the church. And
who is this guy?
This is AI. But
Okay.
it's from the people that try to make, the whole replacement theology, Church Israel starts all the way back with God's redemptive plan, beginning with Adam and Eve, and that they were the first initial recipients of salvation, and the church has been formed in the New Testament and established.
Right. So how are they underage?
Yeah, they're not.
Okay. So maybe they're saying that they shouldn't be in the sanctuary. Because they're a day old. I don't know.
Yeah.
The whole thing's goofy. There is
yeah.
no church in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
So, yeah. By the way, a mystery, I just used the word mystery. New Testament term mystery is the idea that it's something, when we think of a mystery, we think of a whodunit. And so, Knives Out, is that the name of that movie? Knives Out? Yeah. And so you got this whole thing where they're trying to figure out who murdered somebody and that kind of situation, and it's not until you get to the end of the story that you figure it out, and that's what we think of as a mystery. The word mystery in the New Testament means something that had not been revealed before this point that has now been revealed. And so God considers the church to be a mystery. You had hints of it in the Old Testament, but there was no church. So you just had the Jewish nation, and everybody came into a relationship through Judaism. And then when you get to the New Testament, God takes Jews and Gentiles, brings them together as one body. Jews and Gentiles are not Judaism. They're not Israel. Israel is Israel. And so Israel and the Gentiles come together in the church, and the church is a New Testament concept. It's not an Old Testament one. And so that's clearly taught in the Bible. And to get away from that, you have to ignore clear passages that are spoken about. Jesus said exactly the same thing that Paul said. When he was talking to Peter, he said, "Who do men say that I am?" And they came up with all kinds of things that people were saying. "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter said, "You're the Messiah, you're the Christ, you're the Son of the living God." And Jesus said, "Flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven." And then he says, "And you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." So the church didn't exist at the time that Jesus was on the earth. And so you don't have the church in existence until after the resurrection of Christ. And specifically, most commentators put the beginning of the church in Acts chapter 2, when the Holy Spirit is given to the church. And so, again, the whole premise is wrong, and it's unbiblical. So,
all right, we'll end it there for today. Thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully you're blessed today. If you have questions for Pastor Steve, email me, crosswalkradio@gmail.com. You can text or voicemail 707-872-7677. Check out our new podcast. The link will be in the description for you guys to see that as well. And then we'll see you next week, Wednesday.